Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as his cargo ship descended through the thick clouds of Casara. The planet was supposed to be empty, just another refueling stop on his long route through the outer territories. His scanner had picked up some wreckage on the surface, and company policy required him to investigate. Most of the time, it was just space debris, nothing worth the trouble. The landing was rough. Casara's surface was covered in red rocks and dust that seemed to get into everything. Jake grabbed his emergency kit and stepped out of the ship, squinting against the harsh sunlight. The wreckage was about 100 meters away, the twisted remains of what looked like a small transport vessel. Scorch marks covered the metal, and parts were scattered across the rocky ground. As Jake got closer, he heard something that made him stop. It was a sound he had never heard before, a high-pitched crying that seemed almost musical. He moved carefully around a large piece of broken hull and froze. There, huddled against a rock, was a creature about the size of a large dog. It had scales that shimmered between blue and silver, even though they were covered in dust and dried blood. Two small wings were folded against its body, but one of them bent at an unnatural angle. The creature turned its head toward Jake, and he saw tears streaming from its large golden eyes. A dragon hatchling. Jake's heart pounded. Everyone in the galaxy knew about dragons. The Draken were one of the most feared species in known space. They were warriors, conquerors, creatures that showed no mercy. Stories told of entire colonies being destroyed when humans accidentally wandered into Draken territory. And here was one of their young, injured, and alone. The smart thing would be to walk away. The safe thing would be to get back in his ship and pretend he never saw anything. Dragons grew up to be dangerous, everyone knew that. But the hatchling made that crying sound again, and Jake saw it try to move toward him before collapsing. Its broken wing dragged on the ground, and it whimpered in pain. Jake's ship AI spoke through his communicator. Caution advised. Draken hatchlings are protected by galactic law. Interference could result in serious consequences. It's dying, Jake said quietly, kneeling down a few meters from the creature. Draken culture practices survival of the fittest. Weak hatchlings are often abandoned. This appears to be such a case. Jake looked around at the wreckage. This wasn't abandonment in the traditional sense. Someone had attacked this ship. Someone had tried to kill this hatchling. The little dragon watched him with those golden eyes, and Jake saw something there that surprised him. Not aggression or danger, but fear and hope mixed together. He made his decision. Slowly, Jake opened his emergency kit and pulled out a medical scanner. The hatchling flinched, but didn't try to run. Maybe it couldn't. Jake spoke in a soft voice, the way he used to talk to scared animals back on Earth. "Hey there, little one. I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help, okay?" The scanner beeped as Jake moved it over the hatchling's body. Broken wing, definitely. Malnutrition, dehydration, several cuts and bruises. The little dragon had been here for at least 2 days without food or water. Jake pulled out a water pack and carefully squeezed a few drops onto his hand, then held it out. The hatchling sniffed, then slowly extended its long tongue and licked the water from Jake's palm. Its tongue was warm and rough, like a cat's but bigger. Jake gave it more water, being careful not to let it drink too fast. The creature's crying quieted to small, whimpering sounds. "I'm going to pick you up now," Jake said, knowing the hatchling probably couldn't understand him but hoping his tone would help. "Your wing needs to be set, and you need real food." When Jake reached for the hatchling, it didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into his touch, making a sound that was almost like a purr. Jake carefully lifted the small dragon, surprised by how light it was. The creature should have weighed more. It really was starving. Carrying the hatchling back to his ship, Jake's mind raced with questions. Why was this dragon here alone? Where were its parents? Who attacked the ship? But right now, those questions didn't matter as much as keeping the little creature alive. Inside the ship, Jake laid the hatchling on a soft blanket in his sleeping quarters. The dragon's eyes were starting to close, exhausted from pain and fear. Jake worked quickly, using supplies from his medical kit to clean the wounds. The broken wing was the biggest problem. He had never set a dragon wing before, had never even seen one up close, but he did his best with what he knew about bird anatomy. The hatchling cried out when Jake straightened the wing, but it didn't try to bite him. Jake created a splint using strips of cloth and lightweight metal rods, then wrapped it carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do until he could find proper help. "There you go," Jake said, stroking the scales on the dragon's head. They were surprisingly smooth. "You're safe now." The hatchling opened one golden eye and looked at Jake. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Then the little dragon closed its eyes again and fell into an exhausted sleep. Jake sat back and rubbed his face. What had he just done? He had a dragon on his ship. A baby dragon, yes, but still a dragon. If other Draken found out, they might see this as kidnapping. If the authorities found out, he could lose his pilot's license for interfering with another species. But as he watched the small chest rise and fall with each breath, Jake knew he couldn't regret it. The hatchling had needed help, and he had given it. Whatever came next, he would deal with it. He just hoped he hadn't made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 years had passed since that day on Casara, and Jake's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The small hatchling he had rescued now filled half of his cargo ship's living space. Ember, as Jake had named him, was about the size of a horse, with scales that gleamed like polished sapphires in the light. His wing had healed, though it remained slightly smaller than the other, giving him a lopsided appearance when he stretched them out. Jake sat in the pilot's seat, guiding his ship toward the next delivery point. Behind him, he heard the familiar sound of Ember's claws clicking on the metal floor. The dragon had learned to move quietly over the years, but he still made noise when he was excited about something. "We are approaching Station 42, the ship's AI announced. Reminder that docking bay regulations prohibit unregistered creatures. Yeah, Jake muttered. Ember knows the drill. The dragon made a huffing sound that Jake had learned meant annoyance. Ember hated hiding in the cargo hold during docking procedures, but it was necessary. The galaxy wasn't ready to see a human traveling peacefully with a draken, even a young one. As Jake prepared the docking sequence, he felt a presence in his mind. It was gentle, like someone tapping on a door. This was how Ember communicated now. About a year ago, the dragon had started projecting thoughts directly into Jake's head. At first, it had been confusing and frightening, but Jake had grown used to it. "Why must I hide, Jake?" Ember's mental voice was young, curious, with an underlying sadness. "Because people are afraid," Jake answered out loud. He had learned that he didn't need to think his responses. Ember could understand spoken words just fine. "They don't know you like I do. They only know the stories. Stories about my kind being monsters." Jake felt the weight of those words. Over the past 3 years, Ember had slowly shared pieces of his past. The memories were fragmented, like a puzzle with missing pieces. But Jake had learned that dragons were indeed as fierce as the stories claimed. Draken culture valued strength above all else. Weakness was not tolerated. The sick, the injured, the different were cast out, or worse. "You're not a monster, buddy," Jake said firmly. "You're nothing like those stories." Ember's presence in his mind grew warmer, grateful. The dragon moved into the cargo hold without further complaint, curling up between crates of supplies. Jake completed the docking procedure and went out to meet his client, a nervous merchant who barely looked at him while signing the delivery confirmation. When Jake returned to the ship an hour later, he found Ember awake and agitated. The dragon's tail was lashing back and forth, a sign of distress that Jake had learned to recognize. "What's wrong?" Jake asked, securing the door behind him. Images flooded into Jake's mind, a grand palace made of black stone, dragons flying in formation overhead, a large dragon with dark red scales and cold eyes, a sense of overwhelming fear and pain. Then darkness. Jake had seen these images before. They came to Ember in dreams, fragments of memory from before Jake found him. But this time, there was something new. A name. "Vex," Ember said, and Jake heard the word both out loud and in his mind. The dragon's voice when he spoke was deeper now, though still young. He rarely used it, preferring the mental connection. His name was Vex. Who was he? Jake asked gently, sitting down beside his friend. I don't know, but I see him in my memories. He was there when everything went dark. Ember's golden eyes met Jake's. I think he's the reason I was left to die. Jake put his hand on Ember's scaled shoulder. The dragon had grown too large for Jake to hold now, but the gesture still brought comfort. Whatever happened before, it doesn't matter. You're here now, and you're safe. Am I, though? Ember asked. I hear the broadcasts, Jake. The Draken Empire is expanding. They destroyed another colony last month. How long before someone recognizes what I am? How long before they come for me? It was a fair question, and one that kept Jake awake at night. Reports of Draken aggression had increased over the past year. The Empire was pushing into new territories, conquering worlds with brutal efficiency. And Jake was harboring one of their kind. Then we keep moving, Jake said. We stay in the outer territories where no one asks too many questions. We've made it work this far. Ember was quiet for a long moment. Then he projected a new image into Jake's mind. It was a memory, but not one of Ember's past. It was from a few months ago when they had stopped at a small outpost. A group of children had been playing near the docking bay, and one had fallen and scraped her knee badly. Jake had stopped to help, cleaning and bandaging the wound while the girl's mother thanked him repeatedly. You taught me that, Ember said softly, to help someone in need, even when it's inconvenient, even when it might be dangerous. That's just being decent, Jake replied. No, not in Draken culture. Helping the weak makes you weak. That's what I was taught before I knew you. Ember's tail stopped lashing. You saved me when you should have walked away. You taught me that strength isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting them. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of himself as a teacher, just a guy trying to do the right thing. But Ember was right. The dragon had learned human values because Jake had shown them through his actions. The ship's communication system beeped. Jake walked over and saw a message notification. It was from the station master marked Urgent. His stomach dropped as he opened it. Attention all vessels. Draken military delegation arriving in 6 hours. All ships are required to remain docked for inspection. This is not optional. Jake's blood ran cold. He looked at Ember, whose eyes had gone wide with fear. They found me, Ember whispered. Jake's hands moved quickly across the control panel, checking fuel levels and plotting escape routes. 6 hours wasn't much time, but if they left now, they might make it out of the station's range before the Draken delegation arrived. Jake, stop! Ember's mental voice was calm, which surprised Jake more than anything else could have. The dragon stood up, his full height now reaching Jake's shoulder. Despite his smaller size compared to adult dragons, Ember had grown strong over the past 3 years. What do you mean, stop? We need to leave now, Jake said, his fingers still dancing across the controls. They aren't here for me. They don't know I'm here. Ember tilted his head, his golden eyes thoughtful. If they were hunting for a missing prince, they would have found us years ago. This is something else. Missing prince? Jake froze, turning to look at his friend. What are you talking about? More images flooded into Jake's mind. A ceremony with hundreds of dragons gathered. A small hatchling being presented to the crowd, wearing a golden band around his neck. The same dark red dragon from before, Vex, standing beside the hatchling with an expression that looked respectful but felt wrong somehow. I was someone important, Ember said quietly. I think I was royalty. Before Jake could respond, a loud bang echoed through the docking bay. The ship's external cameras showed 4 massive dragons landing on the station platform. They were easily 3 times Ember's size, covered in dark armor that made them look even more intimidating. Behind them walked a dragon who was larger still, his scales a deep bronze color that seemed to absorb the light. Jake's communicator crackled to life. All ship captains report to Docking Bay Central immediately. This is not a request. Stay here and stay hidden, Jake told Ember firmly. Lock the door behind me. If anything happens, you run. The emergency pod has enough fuel to get you to the neutral zone. I won't leave you. Yes, you will. That's an order. Jake tried to sound stern, but his voice shook slightly. Ember had become more than a rescued animal or even a friend. He was family. Jake joined the other pilots in the Central Bay area. There were about 20 of them, all looking nervous. The bronze dragon stood before them, his presence commanding despite not saying a word. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and resonated through the entire bay. I am General Korath of the Draken Empire. We are searching for someone very important, a young dragon, smaller than average, with blue and silver scales. He would be approximately 3 years of age. Jake's heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He kept his face neutral, the way he used to do when playing poker with other pilots. This dragon is Prince Ember, the rightful heir to the Draken throne, Korath continued. He was believed dead, killed in an attack on his transport 3 years ago. However, we have received information suggesting he may have survived. One of the other pilots, a woman named Lisa, raised her hand. Why would a Draken prince be out here in the outer territories? Because someone wanted him dead, Korath said bluntly. Someone who now sits on the throne that should belong to the prince. The general began to pace, his clawed feet clicking on the metal floor. Lord Vex, the prince's regent uncle, claimed the throne when the prince was declared dead. But evidence has come to light suggesting Vex orchestrated the attack himself. A few loyal soldiers survived and have been searching for any sign of the prince. Jake felt sick. Ember's fractured memories were making sense now. The dragon in his visions, Vex, had tried to kill him, had left him broken and dying on Casara. If anyone has seen this dragon or has any information about his whereabouts, speak now, Korath demanded. The fate of the galaxy may depend on it. Why should we care about Draken politics? Another pilot asked, trying to sound brave but failing. Your kind has been terrorizing the outer colonies for months. Korath's eyes narrowed. That is precisely why you should care. Lord Vex is a tyrant who believes the Draken should rule through fear and conquest. Under his leadership, the Empire will continue to expand, destroying everything in its path. Prince Ember was raised by the previous emperor to value honor and diplomacy. He is our only hope for peace. Jake's mind raced. Could it be true? Was the small, crying hatchling he had saved really a prince? More importantly, was returning Ember to his people the right thing to do, or would it just get him killed? We will be conducting ship inspections, Korath announced. Anyone found harboring the prince will be dealt with according to Draken law. The pilots were dismissed, and Jake walked back to his ship with his legs feeling like lead. When he entered, Ember was waiting right by the door, his body tense. I heard everything, Ember said mentally. I remember now, Jake. I remember who I was, who I'm supposed to be. It could be a trap, Jake said. This Korath could be working with Vex. No, Ember's mental voice was certain. I know Korath. He was my father's most trusted general. He was kind to me when I was very young. He used to let me climb on his back. Jake sat down heavily on a crate. So what do you want to do? Ember was quiet for a long moment. If I don't return, Vex will continue to destroy innocent lives. The Draken Empire will become a plague on the galaxy. But if I go back, I'll have to face the uncle who tried to kill me. I'll have to fight for a throne I barely remember. You don't have to decide right now, Jake started to say, but Ember cut him off. Yes, I do. They're inspecting ships, Jake. They'll find me within hours. The dragon moved closer, pressing his head against Jake's chest the way he used to do when he was small. I'm scared. I know, buddy. I know. Jake wrapped his arms around Ember's neck. But you're not alone. If you go back, I go with you. They'll never allow a human in the Draken court. Jake smiled grimly. Then they'll have to make an exception, because I'm not letting you face this alone. The throne room of the Draken homeworld was carved from black volcanic stone, with pillars that stretched so high they disappeared into shadow. Jake had never seen anything so massive or so intimidating. Dragons of every color filled the vast space, their eyes fixed on the center where two platforms had been raised. On one platform stood Lord Vex, his dark red scales polished to a shine. He was enormous, twice the size of Ember, with scars crisscrossing his body that spoke of countless battles. His eyes were cold and calculating as they swept across the crowd. On the other platform stood Ember, looking small and out of place despite his growth over the past 3 years. His blue and silver scales seemed dull compared to Vex's impressive appearance. His wings, one still slightly crooked from the old injury, were folded tight against his body. Jake stood at the base of Ember's platform, the only human in a room full of dragons. General Korath had argued for hours to get him admitted, finally convincing the council that since Ember insisted on Jake's presence, it should be allowed. The other dragons looked at Jake with a mixture of curiosity and disgust, as if he were an insect that had somehow wandered into their midst. "So the lost prince returns," Vex's voice boomed through the chamber, "and he brings a pet human with him. How touching!" Ember lifted his head. "Jake is not my pet. He is my friend and advisor. He saved my life when you left me to die." A murmur ran through the assembled dragons. Vex's expression didn't change, but his tail lashed once, betraying his anger. "I left you to die? What proof do you have of such an accusation?" Vex asked smoothly. "You were lost in an unfortunate attack by pirates. We mourned your death. The entire empire mourned." "Liar," Ember said simply. Vex's eyes narrowed. "You dare challenge me, little hatchling? You who can barely fly with that twisted wing? You who was raised by humans like some common animal?" Jake felt Ember's anger through their mental connection, but the dragon kept his voice calm. "I challenge you for the throne, as is my right by blood and by law." The crowd erupted in hisses and roars. General Korath stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "The challenge is valid. Prince Ember is the rightful heir. Lord Vex has ruled as regent, but if the prince challenges, the ancient laws must be honored." Vex showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Very well. The 3 trials, as tradition demands: strength, cunning, and wisdom. When you fail, little prince, your human pet will watch you die." The first trial began immediately. It was a test of raw strength, a contest where each dragon had to move a massive stone block across the arena using only their physical power. Vex went first, wrapping his tail around the block and dragging it across the floor in less than a minute. The crowd roared their approval. Ember approached the block, and Jake could see the doubt in the other dragon's eyes. The block was clearly designed for a full-grown dragon, not one of Ember's smaller size. Ember pushed against it with his shoulder, but it barely moved. "You can do this," Jake called out. "Remember what I taught you. It's not always about being the strongest. Sometimes it's about being smart." Ember paused, then walked around the block, examining it from every angle. Instead of pushing it straight across like Vex had done, he positioned himself at a corner and used his tail and legs together, creating leverage. The block began to roll rather than slide, and Ember guided it across the arena. It took him longer than Vex, but he completed the trial. The second trial was cunning. Each dragon was locked in a room with a complex puzzle. They had to escape within 10 minutes or forfeit. Vex emerged in 7 minutes, looking smug. When it was Ember's turn, Jake watched through a viewing window as his friend studied the room. The puzzle involved moving colored stones into specific slots to unlock the door. Most dragons would use trial and error, testing different combinations until one worked. But Ember did something different. He looked at the pattern of wear on the floor, seeing which paths had been walked most often. He examined the stones for fingerprints and scratches. Then he placed all the stones correctly on his first attempt, emerging in just 4 minutes. "Cheating," Vex snarled. "He used observation instead of solving the puzzle." "The trial is to escape the room," General Korath said. The prince succeeded. There is no rule about how it must be done. The final trial was wisdom, and it was the one Jake feared most. A situation was presented to both dragons, and they had to decide on a course of action. The council would judge whose decision showed greater wisdom. The scenario was brutal in its simplicity. A colony world had rebelled against Draken rule. They had killed several dragon ambassadors and declared independence. The question was simple. How should the Empire respond? Vex answered immediately. Destroy them! Burn their cities to ash! Leave no survivors! Make them an example so that no other world dares to rebel. Strength and fear maintain order. The crowd murmured in approval. It was the traditional Draken answer, the one that had kept the Empire powerful for generations. Now it was Ember's turn. The young dragon was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could feel his friend's thoughts racing through their connection. I would ask them why they rebelled, Ember finally said. His voice was soft but clear. If our ambassadors were cruel or unjust, then their deaths were earned. If we ruled through fear alone, then rebellion is inevitable. I would offer them a choice. Remain independent but establish fair trade agreements, or rejoin the Empire under new terms that respect their autonomy and culture. The throne room fell silent. Jake could see shock on the faces of the assembled dragons. Weakness, Vex spat. You would reward rebellion with negotiation? You would let them question our authority? I would give them a reason to be loyal rather than afraid, Ember replied. Fear breeds hate. Hate breeds rebellion. The cycle never ends. And where did you learn such soft thinking? From your human? Ember looked down at Jake and their eyes met. Yes. Jake taught me that strength without compassion is just cruelty. That real power comes from building something better, not just destroying what exists. The Council of Elder Dragons withdrew to deliberate on the trials. Jake stood beside Ember's platform, very aware of the hostile stares from many of the assembled dragons. Vex remained on his platform, looking confident and relaxed, as if the outcome was already decided. They won't choose me, Ember said quietly through their mental connection. My answer was too different from what they expect, too soft. Maybe that's exactly what they need, Jake replied, keeping his voice low. Someone who thinks differently. General Korath approached them, his bronze scales catching the light from the volcanic vents that heated the throne room. Prince Ember, regardless of the Council's decision, know that there are those of us who believe in what you said. The old ways are leading us toward destruction. Before Ember could respond, the Council returned. The eldest dragon, a female with white scales that spoke of incredible age, stepped forward. Her name was Shira, and she had served as advisor to Ember's father, the former emperor. We have reached our decision, Shira announced, her voice carrying across the massive chamber. In the trial of strength, both competitors succeeded, though Lord Vex completed it faster. In the trial of cunning, Prince Ember showed superior intelligence and observation. The trials are balanced. Jake's heart sank. A tie would likely favor Vex, the current ruler. However, Shira continued, the trial of wisdom carries the greatest weight, for a ruler must make decisions that affect millions of lives. We have debated intensely about the approaches presented. Vex straightened, clearly expecting victory. Lord Vex's answer represents the traditional Draken way: strength, dominance, fear. These methods have served our empire for thousands of years. Shira paused, her ancient eyes moving to Ember. But Prince Ember's answer represents something we have lost, something his father tried to teach us before his death. The understanding that true strength lies not in how many worlds we can conquer, but in how many allies we can make. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. The Council's decision is split, Shira said, but I cast the deciding vote in favor of Prince Ember. He has shown wisdom beyond his years and vision that our empire desperately needs. Vex's roar shook the throne room. This is madness! You would give our empire to a crippled child who was raised by a human? He knows nothing of our ways. I know enough to see that our ways are broken, Ember said, his voice growing stronger. You tried to kill me, Uncle. You murdered my father and orchestrated the attack on my transport. You've ruled through terror and led our empire toward isolation and hatred from every other species in the galaxy. Prove it, Vex snarled. Prove I had anything to do with your father's death. General Korath stepped forward, holding a data device. We have testimony from 3 of your own guards. They were ordered to sabotage the prince's transport. One of them kept recordings of your orders, insurance in case you turned on them as well. The recording played for all to hear. Vex's voice, unmistakable, given orders to ensure the young prince didn't survive the journey to the outer colonies. The throne room erupted in chaos, dragons roaring and hissing at the betrayal. Vex launched himself from his platform, not toward Ember, but toward Jake. The human was the easier target, and killing him would hurt Ember more than any physical wound. But Ember was faster. Despite his smaller size and crooked wing, he threw himself between Vex and Jake, taking the full force of his uncle's attack. The 2 dragons tumbled across the stone floor, claws and teeth flashing. Jake wanted to help, but he knew he would only get in the way. This was Ember's fight. Vex was larger and more experienced, but Ember had been learning from Jake for 3 years. He didn't fight with just brute strength. He used strategy, dodging and moving, wearing his uncle down. When Vex lunged with his jaws wide, Ember rolled aside and used his tail to sweep Vex's legs out from under him. The older dragon crashed to the ground, and Ember was on him instantly, pinning him down with claws pressed against Vex's throat. Finish it, Vex growled. That's the Draken way. The winner kills the loser. Ember's claws trembled, and Jake felt the rage and pain flowing through their connection. This dragon had killed Ember's father, had tried to kill Ember himself, had left him broken and dying. Every Draken instinct screamed for blood. But then Ember looked at Jake, and the human shook his head slightly. No, Ember said, stepping back from Vex. I won't kill you. That would make me exactly like you. Instead, you will stand trial for your crimes. You will face justice, not vengeance. The throne room fell silent. No dragon could remember a victor showing mercy to a defeated challenger. Shira's voice rang out. Prince Ember has proven himself worthy, not just through strength or cunning or wisdom, but through compassion, a quality we thought weakness, but which may be our greatest strength. All hail Emperor Ember, ruler of the Draken Empire! The chant started slowly with General Korath and a few others, but it grew, spreading through the chamber until even the dragons who had doubted were joining in. Emperor Ember! Emperor Ember! Jake watched his friend stand tall, accepting the crown that was brought forward. It was the same golden band Ember had worn in his fragmented memories, now placed around his neck once more. Later, after the ceremony, after Vex had been taken away to face trial, Ember and Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the Draken capital city. The buildings were made of black stone like the palace, but lights were beginning to appear in windows as night fell. I'm making you my royal advisor, Ember said. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even when it's hard to hear. I'm just a cargo pilot, Jake protested. I don't know anything about running an empire. You know about kindness, about helping people even when it's hard, about choosing what's right over what's easy. Ember bumped his head gently against Jake's shoulder. You saved a crying hatchling when you could have walked away. You taught him that strength and compassion aren't opposites. That's exactly what this empire needs. Jake smiled, scratching under Ember's chin the way he used to when the dragon was small enough to fit in his arms. All right, Your Majesty. But first rule as royal advisor, no more hiding in cargo holds. Ember laughed, a sound like rumbling thunder. Agreed. And my first decree as emperor, the Draken Empire will no longer abandon weak hatchlings. Every life has value. Every dragon deserves a chance. As they looked out over the city, Jake realized something important. He hadn't just saved a dragon 3 years ago. He had saved a future, changed the course of history with one simple act of kindness. And now, together, They would reshape an entire empire. The stars above them shone bright, and somewhere out there, other cargo pilots were making their routine runs, never knowing that one of their own had helped raise a king.